Well, it's time for another Charlie and Chocolate Factory reading. We left off with Augustus Gloop. You remember, he's the one that eats candy and chocolate all of the time. I know some of you second graders that would like to do that, but your mom and dad won't let you. Good for them. So, just enjoy the reading, and I hope you got all of your work done today, all right? Here we go, picking up with Augustus Gloop. When Mr. Wonka turned around and saw what Augustus Gloop was doing, kneeling down at the chocolate river, scooping it into his mouth as fast as he can, he cried out, "Oh no! Please, Augustus, please! I beg of you not to do that! My chocolate must be untouched by human hands!" "Augustus," called out Mrs. Gloop, "didn't you hear what the man said? Come away from that river at once." "Oh, this stuff is terrific," said Augustus, taking not the slightest notice of his mother or Mr. Wonka. "Oh boy, I need a bucket to drink it properly." "Augustus," cried Mr. Wonka, hopping up and down and waggling his stick in the air, "you must come away. You are dirtying my chocolate." "Augustus," cried Mr. and Mrs. Gloop, but Augustus was deaf to everything except the call of his stomach. He was now lying full length on the ground with his head far out over the river, lapping up the chocolate like a dog. "Augustus," shouted Mrs. Gloop, "you'll be giving that nasty cold of yours to about 1,000,000 people all over the country." "Be careful, Augustus," shouted Mr. Gloop. "You're leaning too far out." Mr. Gloop was absolutely right. Suddenly, there was a shriek and then a splash, and into the river went Augustus Gloop. And in 1 second he had disappeared under the brown surface. "Save him!" screamed Mrs. Gloop, going white in the face and waving her umbrella about. "He'll drown! He can't swim at all! Save him!" "Good heavens, woman," said Mr. Gloop, "I'm not diving in there. I've got my best suit on." Augustus Gloop's face came up to the surface, painted brown with chocolate. "Help! Help! Get me out! Get me out!" he yelled. "Don't just stand there!" Mrs. Gloop screamed at Mr. Gloop. "Do something!" "Okay, all right, I will. I'll do something," said Mr. Gloop, who was now taking off his suit jacket and getting ready to dive into the chocolate. But while he was doing this, the wretched boy was being sucked closer and closer toward the mouth of one of the great pipes that was dangling down into the river. Then, all at once, the powerful suction took hold of him completely, and he was pulled under the surface and then into the mouth of the pipe. The crowd on the riverbank waited breathlessly to see what would happen. "There he is!" somebody shouted, pointing upwards. Sure enough, because the pipe was made of glass, Augustus Gloop could be clearly seen shooting up inside the pipe, head first, like a torpedo. "Help! Call the police!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus, come back at once! Where are you going?" "It's a wonder to me," said Mr. Gloop, "how that pipe is big enough for him to go through it." "It isn't big enough," said Charlie. "Oh dear, look, he's slowing down. He's stuck." And yes, he was stuck, as Charlie had said. "It's his stomach that's done it," said Mr. Gloop. "He's blocked the whole pipe," said Grandpa Joe. "None of the chocolate can get by." "Who cares? Smash the pipe!" yelled Mrs. Gloop, still waving her umbrella. "Augustus, come out of there at once!" The watchers below could see the chocolate swishing around the boy in the pipe, and they could see it building up behind him in a big, solid mass, pushing against him. The pressure must have been terrific. Something had to give. Well, something did give, all right, and that something was Augustus. Woof! Up he shot again like a bullet in the barrel of a gun. He's disappeared!" yelled Mrs. Gloop. "Where does that pipe go to? Quick, call the fire department!" "Keep calm," cried Mr. Wonka. "Keep calm, my dear lady. Keep calm. There is no danger. No danger whatsoever, I promise. Augustus has gone on a little journey, that's all. A most interesting little journey at that, but he'll come out of it just fine. You wait and see." "How can he possibly come out just fine?" snapped Mrs. Gloop. "He'll be made into marshmallows in 5 seconds. "Impossible, unthinkable, inconceivable, absurd," said Mr. Wonka. "He can never be made into marshmallows." "And why not, may I ask?" shouted Mrs. Gloop. "Because that pipe doesn't go to the marshmallow room," Mr. Wonka answered. "It doesn't go anywhere near it. That pipe, the one Augustus went up, happens to lead directly to the room where I make a most delicious kind of strawberry-flavored, chocolate-coated fudge." "Then he'll be made into strawberry-flavored chocolate-coated fudge!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "Oh, my poor Augustus. They'll be selling them by the pound all over the country by tomorrow morning." "Quite right," said Mr. Gloop. "I know I'm right," said Mrs. Gloop. "Oh, I wasn't trying to joke," said Mr. Gloop. "Well, Mr. Wonka thinks it's all a joke," cried Mrs. Gloop. "Just look at him. He's laughing his head off. How dare you laugh like that when my boy's just gone up your pipe? You monster!" she shrieked, pointing her umbrella at Mr. Wonka as though she were going to run him through. "You think it's a joke, do you? You think that sucking my boy up into your fudge room like that is just one great big colossal joke? He'll be perfectly safe," said Mr. Wonka, still giggling slightly. "He'll be chocolate fudge," shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Never," cried Mr. Wonka. "Of course he will," said Mrs. Gloop. "I wouldn't allow it." "And why not?" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Because the taste would be terrible," said Mr. Wonka. "Ugh. Just imagine it. Augustus flavored chocolate-coated Gloop. Oof, no one would buy it." "They most certainly would," cried Mr. Gloop indignantly. "I don't want to think about it," said Mrs. Gloop. "Nor do I," said Mr. Wonka, "and I do promise you, madam, that your darling boy is perfectly safe." "If he's perfectly safe, then where is he? Lead me to him this instant," she said. Mr. Wonka turned around and clicked his fingers sharply, click, 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 3 times. Immediately an Oompa Loompa appeared, as if from nowhere, and stood beside him. The Oompa Loompa bowed and smiled, showing beautiful white teeth. His skin was rosy white, his long hair was golden brown, and the top of his head came just above the height of Mr. Wonka's knee. "Now listen to me," said Mr. Wonka, looking down at the tiny man. "I want you to take Mr. and Mrs. Gloop up to the fudge room and help them find their son, Augustus. He's just gone up the pipe." The Oompa Loompa looked at Mr. Wonka and exploded into laughter. "Oh, do be quiet," said Mr. Wonka. "Control yourself. Pull yourself together. Mrs. Gloop does not think it's at all funny." "You could say that again," said Mrs. Gloop. "So, go straight to the fudge room," Mr. Wonka said to the Oompa Loompa, "and when you get there, take a long stick and start poking around inside the big chocolate mixing barrel. I'm almost certain you'll find him there. But you'd better hurry. You'll have to hurry, because if you leave him in the chocolate mixing barrel too long, he's liable to get poured into the fudge boiler, and that really would make my fudge quite uneatable." Mrs. Gloop let out a shriek of fury. I'm joking, said Mr. Wonka, giggling madly. "I didn't mean it. Forgive me. I'm so sorry. Goodbye, Mr. and Mrs. Gloop. Goodbye. I'll see you later." As Mr. and Mrs. Gloop and their tiny escort hurried away, the 5 Oompa Loompas on the far side of the river suddenly began hopping about and beating wildly upon a number of very small drums. "Augustus Gloop," they chanted. "Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop." "Grandpa," cried Charlie. "Listen to him, Grandpa. What are they doing?" "Shh," whispered Grandpa Joe. "I think they're going to sing us a song." Now, I'm not going to sing you the song because I don't have a clue exactly how you would sing like an Oompa Loompa, so I'm just going to give you the words. You can sing it yourself if you want to. "Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop, how long could we allow this beast to gorge and guzzle, feed and feast on everything he wanted to? It simply wouldn't do. However long this boy might live, we're positive he'd never give even the smallest bit of fun or happiness to anyone. So what we do in cases such as this, we use the gentle touch, and carefully we take the brat and turn him into something that will give great pleasure to us all. This revolting boy, of course, was so unutterably vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile, he left a most disgusting taste inside our mouths, and so in haste we chose a thing that, come what may, would take the nasty taste away. Come on, we cried, the time is ripe to send him shooting up the pipe. He has to go, it has to be, and very soon he's going to see, inside the room to which he's gone, some funny things are going on. But don't, dear children, be alarmed. Augustus Gloop will not be harmed." "I told you they love singing," cried Mr. Wonka. "Aren't they delightful and charming?" But you mustn't believe a word of what they said. It's all nonsense, every bit of it. "Are the Oompa Loompas really joking, Grandpa?" asked Charlie. "Of course they're joking, I guess," said Grandpa Joe. "Now, off we go," cried Mr. Wonka. "Hurry up, everybody. Follow me to the next room. Please don't worry about Augustus Gloop. He's bound to come out in the wash. They always do. Now, we shall have to make the next part of the journey by boat. Ah, here she comes. Take a look." A steamy mist was rising up now from the great warm chocolate river, and out of the mist there appeared suddenly a most fantastic pink boat. It was a large open rowboat with a tall front and a tall back, and it was of such a shining, sparkling, glistening pink color that the whole thing looked as though it were made of bright pink glass. There were many oars on either side of it, and as the boat came closer, the watchers on the riverbank could see that the oars were being pulled by Oompa Loompas, at least 10 of them to each oar. "This is my private boat," cried Mr. Wonka, beaming with pleasure. "I made it by hollowing out an enormous boiled sweet. Isn't it beautiful? See how it comes cutting through the river?" The gleaming pink boiled treat boat glided up the riverbank. 100 Oompa Loompas rested on their oars and stared up at the visitors. Then suddenly, for some reason best known to themselves, they all burst into laughter. "What's so funny?" asked Violet Beauregard. "Oh, don't worry about them," cried Mr. Wonka. "They're always laughing, as I said. Now, jump into the boat, all of you. Come on, hurry up." As soon as everyone was safely in, the Oompa Loompas pushed the boat away from the bank and began to row swiftly down the river. "Hey there, Mike TV," shouted Mr. Wonka. "Please don't lick the boat. It'll only make it sticky." "Daddy," said Veruca Salt, "I want a boat like this. I want you to buy me a big pink boiled sweet boat exactly like Mr. Wonka's. And I want lots of Oompa Loompas to row me about. And I want a chocolate river. And I want... "She wants a good spanking," whispered Grandpa Joe to Charlie. The old man was sitting in the back of the boat, and little Charlie Bucket was right beside him, holding tightly to his grandfather's hand. He was in a whirl of excitement. Everything he had seen so far, the great chocolate river, the waterfall, the huge sucking pipes, the candy meadows, the Oompa Loompas, the beautiful pink boat, and most of all, Mr. Willy Wonka himself. It was all so astonishing that Charlie began to wonder whether there could possibly be any more astonishments left. Where were they going now? What were they going to see? And what in the world was going to happen in the next room? "Isn't it marvelous?" said Grandpa Joe, grinning at Charlie. Charlie nodded and smiled back up at the old man. Suddenly, Mr. Wonka, who was sitting on Charlie's other side, reached down to the bottom of the boat, picked up a large mug, dipped it into the river, filled it with chocolate, and handed it to Charlie. "Drink this. It'll do you good," he said. "You look starved to death." Then Mr. Wonka filled a second mug and gave it to Grandpa Joe. "You too, sir. You look like a skeleton. What's the matter? Hasn't there been anything to eat in your house lately?" "Not much," said Grandpa Joe. Charlie put the mug to his lips, and as the rich, warm, creamy chocolate ran down his throat into his empty tummy, his whole body from head to toe began to tingle with pleasure, and a feeling of intense happiness spread over him. "Do you like it?" asked Mr. Wonka. "Oh, it's wonderful," Charlie said. "The creamiest, loveliest chocolate I've ever tasted," said Grandpa Joe. "That's because it's been mixed by a waterfall," Mr. Wonka told him. The boat sped on down the river. The river was getting more narrow. There was some kind of a dark tunnel ahead, a great round tunnel that looked kind of like an enormous pipe, and the river was running right into the tunnel, and so was the boat. "Row on!" shouted Mr. Wonka, jumping up and waving a stick in the air. "Full speed ahead!" And with that, the Oompa Loompas rowing faster and faster and faster, the boat shot into the pitch-dark tunnel, and all the passengers screamed with excitement. "How can they see where they're going? It's so dark," said Violet Beauregard in the darkness. "There's no knowing where they're going," cried Mr. Wonka, hooting with laughter. "There's no earthly way of knowing which direction they are going. There's no knowing where they're rowing, or which way the river's flowing. Not a speck of light is showing, so the danger must be growing. For the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing." "He's off his rocker," shouted one of the fathers, and the other parents joined in agreement. "He's crazy," they shouted. "No, he's not," said Grandpa Joe. "Switch on the lights," shouted Mr. Wonka suddenly. And instantly, on came the lights, and the whole tunnel was brilliantly lit up, and Charlie could see that they were indeed inside a gigantic pipe, and the great upward curving walls of the pipe were pure white and spotlessly clean. The river of chocolate was flowing very fast inside the pipe, and the Oompa Loompas were all rowing like crazy, and the boat was rocketing along at a furious pace. Mr. Wonka was jumping up and down in the back of the boat, calling to the rowers to row faster still. He seemed to love the sensation of whizzing through a white tunnel in a pink boat on a chocolate river, and he clapped his hands and laughed and kept glancing at his passengers to see if they were enjoying it as much as he. "Look, Grandpa," cried Charlie, "there's a door in the wall." So there was. It was a green door, and it was set into the wall of the tunnel just above the level of the river. As they flashed past it, there was just enough time to read the writing on the door. "Storeroom number 54, it said. All the creams. Dairy cream, whipped cream, violet cream, coffee cream, pineapple cream, vanilla cream, and hair cream." Hair cream? Cried Mike TV. You use hair cream? Row on, shouted Mr. Wonka. There's no time to answer silly questions. They passed a black door. Storeroom number 71, it said on it. Whips, all shapes and sizes. Whips? Cried Veruca Salt. What on earth do you use whips for? For whipping cream, of course, said Mr. Wonka. How can you whip cream without whips? Whipped cream isn't whipped cream at all unless it's been whipped with whips. They passed a yellow door on which it said storeroom number 77. All the beans. Cocoa beans, coffee beans, jelly beans, and has-beans. Has-beans? Cried Violet Beauregard. You're one yourself, said Mr. Wonka. There's no time for arguing. Press on, press on. But 5 seconds later, when a bright red door came in sight ahead, he suddenly waved his gold-topped cane in the air and shouted, Stop the boats! We'll pick up on Chapter 19, The Inventing Room, next time. Bye, guys. Have a great day.